You know, sometimes beekeepers even open their hives and there's just no explanation, but the bees are all dead. I'm Ellie Symes. I'm a junior here. I study environmental management over at SPIA. Next year I'll be doing my master's in public affairs and environmental science at SPIA too. I don't want to leave yet. Basically, I'm really interested in food security and issues with the food system, and the bees play a really important part of that. So I Googled environmental volunteering after freshman year because I was getting bored of lifeguarding, and I saw beekeeper's assistant, and I was like, that sounds interesting and weird, let's try it. And I fell in love with it. When I came back to campus that next fall, I joined a group called Garden Corps, and they wanted us to start individual projects. So I remembered my time this summer and said, let's get bees. And worked that whole year, researched about more I need to know about beekeeping, bought the bees and the equipment, got the grant to get the equipment and the bees, and then in the spring I started up the hives. So this is the hardest part about beekeeping, is starting the smoker. So I always make sure it's cool to the touch, and I'm ready to go. So what the smoke does is it acts like a fire. Bees normally build their hives in hollow trees. So in nature, when fires happen, they collect all the honey they can for the road, and when they fill their stomachs with honey, they're unable to use their stingers. And also the smell of the smoke prevents them from all being able to communicate with each other because they communicate through smells. And so I use my hive tool, which is really just a paint scraper, to pry open the box. So I know this is a weak hive because surprisingly this is not a lot of bees. There's no queens, so there's no more bees being made. Where all these bees are drinking from, that's them drinking the honey I just talked about. They're filling their stomachs with honey, and it looks very healthy, which makes me happy that there's no pests in the hives messing with the drone. So this comb has very, very few bees, but it's filled with honey. This will be the food that will carry them through winter. It's very important for a beekeeper at this time of year to make sure that they have the adequate amount of honey supply. So I experienced a lot of problems this summer myself and got the real life view of the soap opera that beekeeping is. So bees are important because they're a building block of our ecosystem. They pollinate flowers, which animals feed off of, which we eat animals, and pollinate a lot of the produce that we eat today. Basically what's happening is there's lack of biodiversity. We've got this monoculture country of soybeans and corn, and bees don't pollinate soybeans and corn. And also there's been pests that have been introduced from Europe that don't affect European honeybees, but are devastating American populations. One of those is the varroa mite, and it's devastating. It's a parasite that latches onto the bees and totally paralyzes them. Another big thing is just our overuse of pesticides. So not only have those monocultures, but they're interacting with those chemicals in the environment. So we've kind of gone away from a bee-friendly environment, and they don't have enough resources to get food. So that's why their populations are declining. So with my hives, I saw the problems as well. And what I had to do in the fall was decide, okay, do these bees have enough honey to survive? So one of my colonies, I wasn't really loving how much honey they'd brought in. They had had a problem of a missing queen earlier. I also had a fungus, which grows and feeds on the larva, so the bees can't reproduce. So if the honey's getting eaten, then they don't have enough to feed the babies, and they don't have enough to build for winter. Colony collapse disorder has also seen problems with queens absconding. So what that means is they just leave the hive. I had it happen to my hive as well. The queen just left. So I've confirmed that there's no queen in this hive, so I'm going to combine it with my other hive to get a big, strong colony ready for winter. I was trying to requeen the hive, and they were not taking to a new queen. So it was perfect. I had these bees that were going to die because they didn't have a queen reproducing and generating the cycle of generations. And then I had bees that needed their bees as honey, and had a nice healthy queen. I'm going to go ahead and put the top lid on this hive because this is going to be the top of the new hive. And I'm going to open this hive back up. I take newspaper, and I'm going to lay the newspaper over the top of the old hive. I'm going to perforate some slits so that the bees can smell each other. They're going to chew all this up, and the amount of time it takes for them to do that is the amount of time necessary for them to blend scents and become one hive. So I'm going to pry this box from the bottom, and I need to get this extension feeder on there. Woo! So this is my new hive. That hive weighed about 50 pounds. This hive is not toppling over in the wind. So like I said, I'm going to come back in a week after the bees acclimate together, and I'll condense this down to 1 or 2 boxes. Normally, if there would have been a queen in this hive, I could have still used the same practice, but the queens actually would have battled it out, and one would have killed the other, and that would have been the queen for the winter. But right now I know what queen I have. I feel good about her and her laying pattern, so I'm feeling really good about this hive for winter. At this point, it's the beekeeper's dilemma is you shut them up for winter, and right now I'm crossing my fingers until it's warm enough again to go out there and feed them and check in on them. It is going to be devastating for us. We're not going to be eating the food that we know today because it is all linked together. In Asia, the bee populations have collapsed because the governments don't regulate the pesticides at all. So what they're doing is actually using child labor to hand pollinate a lot of these crops. That's not feasible economically or political for everyone else in the world, many other places. So it's not going to work. We need these crops, and if you do lose the bees and you lose all those crops, well, a lot of those crops are shared pollinators with like hummingbirds and some of the other pollinators like bats. And so if those crops die, then they're losing some of their food, and then their populations are declining, and it's just this ripple effect throughout the environment. There's lots of things. Obviously, you could take on the hobby of beekeeping. It is expensive and risky, but it's really fun, and if you want a little bit of excitement and drama in your life, it's definitely the perfect hobby to take up. Another is you could donate to beekeeping research. You could plant clover instead of grass. It's kind of becoming a new thing. Wildflower gardens is kind of the new hippie, new age thing to do. But it's great because if you make a habitat out of your lawn, you're doing so much more service. You create a natural landscape, and that helps the bees out a lot, tremendously, and the bunnies, all the creatures. Also, just, even if you don't want to do a nice lawn, you could plant flowers, and there's tons of resources online on what flowers bees like and what flowers bees need to pollinate. Also, not kill them when you see them. They're really great animals, and they're so important that it's so unfortunate that people are so afraid of them. I said earlier that this could be a devastating problem, but humans are innovative, we're adaptable, and we're not going to let this happen. There's already so much money being poured into beekeeping research. The art of beekeeping as a hobby has ballooned. I taught a class this fall, and it was filled in a week of people who wanted to learn how to beekeep. It's kind of it's the new trend, and I love it because it needs to be. We're not going to let the bees die because humans are not self-destructive, and we understand that they are extremely important to us.